Hello. Been away, been camping, been really enjoying myself. And by the gods, it's been very, very bloody hot here. So, for today's drink, I have a lot of water. Nice, chilled ice water. And that is going to be plenty. But why don't we just go ahead and get into chapter 9, Leaving the City Again. They spent no longer than 5 days in Miklagard, their income spent and sorted or sent to the north in their homelands. Their days were occupied indulging in the comforts and luxuries the city afforded, but chief among these luxuries was the rest afforded their minds. There were no wars to fight and no death to avoid. The fatigue that came from knowing death could reach you at any time or a storm might strike was immense upon them all. The Varangian were all Northmen. Their understanding of the universe included the knowledge that their death was already fated, and so they each were ready to face it. However, the need for preparedness, constant readiness, tired the mind like nothing else could possibly do. All the warriors aboard Harold's 4 long ships were called to departure and made for the harbor on the morning of October 3rd in the year 1041. They were loaded with rations and weapons, with armor and warriors for the raiding to come. The whole dock this day was a great swell of activity, with hundreds of the local Byzantine coming out of the city gates to watch the fabled warrior Varangian go off to war. All those under Harold's command felt the energetic excitement of their voyage, especially the Christians. It had been revealed to the sailing Varangian that they were to make for the Palestine and see the holy city of Jerusalem, the Lord's grave. To them, it was the place Holy Christ had died for their sins on earth, and their going was a most welcome pilgrimage. To the heathen, it was just another fucking religious city in the desert, hot and dry. Here, here. The opportunity to explore new lands and come upon treasures unseen before was always a welcomed and anticipated prospect, though, and so all were eager to get underway. Fitzbjorn and his friends had gathered, talking and readying their pack for the days they'd spend at sea, when someone hailed him. "Nameless raider," said a voice. They all turned and saw 2 men walking toward them, a bald man with an ample blonde beard and a red-haired man who'd stood tall even among Varangian. "Olaf and Harold," Fitzbjorn said, genuinely surprised. "Come to see me off. Wish us well." He looked between them with mock severity. "Or did you actually want to have that fight after all?" Halfvald perked up some and his eyes widened. He stared at Harold with a hungry expression. "No! We have heard that you are going to the Holy Land on this coming voyage. We are joining you," Olaf said. "Wait, I recognize this one. That beard and baldness is distinct. You were at the tavern a week back. This one's new friends, aren't you?" asked Niels. "We are," Harold said. "This one, as you call him, spoke so impassioned about those raids that we were swayed to join. What stories we have built as guards are nothing to the tales we heard of your raiding in the Mediterranean." Olaf looked around. "Even of the failed battles fought in the south of Italy," he said conspiratorially. Ragnar snorted and put forth his hand. "You are fellow Christians, I heard. I am Ragnar Scythianach." He shook hands with them, both of them. "But don't be talking about the battles we lost in Italy. The commander is a wee touch sore about that. Best ye in place, except whatever it is he'd rather we focus on. Victory and the like." "I heard that his skalds will not be putting the Italian campaign into the stories of Harold the Hard at all," Inga said. Is that right? Olaf said. A proud man. Harold the Hard. That's a funny name. Are not all great men proud? Asked Harold. Any that I have ever known of, Halfvald said with a smirk. Not the risen Christ, Olaf said. His was the greatest life and completely without pride at all. Ragnar's expression was a mixture of impressed agreement and delight. Aye, brother, that it was. They clasped hands again at their newfound connection. We ought to keep these ones around. By their build, I'm sure they make for good allies in the shield wall. Where are you both from? Asked Bodil. I'm Norse, as are all these ones, except the Scot. Norman us both, from the land that Rollo was given to hold as the Duke. His great-grandchild rules there now. The rest of them looked between each other. Do not speak that too loud to this crew, Niels said. We fought the Norman host in Italy, and those wounds are still fresh. Olaf nodded at this. Well taken. Now what ships are you sailing in? That there, the flagship, Harold's own, the Red North, Bodil said, pointing. But don't think it's only sailing you have ahead of you. There shall too be much rowing. So much rowing makes the shoulders strong. Niels agreed, broadening his own posture. We know some little of this. We were mercenary before being welcomed into the guard. We may go back to it if the raid is not to our liking, though. What is more, is that we are not in the commander's longship. We sail under a captain called Eric, Olaf told them. Oh, I know Eric, Inga said, drawing a look from Hafald. He's a good captain that knows the seas and ships. You'll be safe with him. Good. Then we should go to the posting before we're called deserters. They left for Eric's ship with good-hearted expressions. They seemed excited about the prospect of the coming voyage. You know, I'd wager they are not the only ones, said Ragnar. Well, not that no name inspired more, I mean. They probably aren't the only Christians who has to come in this sailing to make the pilgrimage. I know that seeing the Holy Land is something I have been looking forward to ever since coming here. We're so close! Back on the Isle, I could only dream and pray in my wee hovel. I'm here now, and still it's been years of marauding about when the actual empty sackbulker is bleeding staring me in the face. Finally, time to make the trek. Oh, gods, Bodil said. The idiot is right. She shook her head. What could be worse? It'll be nothing but your preaching about this and that. The good word, she said sarcastically. At least I'll have some others beside me. How I fell in with you lot as my friends, I'll never fucking know. God must have a sense of humor indeed. Maybe we are a test, Fitbjorn said. Think of us as a test of your faith and a challenge to convert. He shrugged. That's a rather positive look at it, Ragnar said. If you try to convert me, I will actually drown you. Call it a baptism. Now listen, you kine, Ragnar began. All hands, aboard and ready to shove off, called a command. Ragnar and Bodil, playing, pushed each other onto the work. The sailors finalized all other preparations and then jumped into the galleys. There came over them each a strange sensation as they departed the solid footing of the dock and went to the slowly rocking seats on the sea. The change in the world from stability to the shifting of the sea was stark and jarring. Everything changed then. You had to become a different person to accommodate the change. Everything else became unseated, and this new world was the sturdy reality. How do you think those two brothers will fare on the sea? Asked Hafvald. Brothers? They were brothers. They had as differing hair as can be seen, Niels said. But their eyes were the same. I think that they are brothers. I agree with Hafvald, Inga said. Bodil scoffed. Of course you do, you lovesick babe. Hafvald Brynolf laughed and put an arm around Inga. She's not sick, he said. Pull from the dock, Harold shouted. He stood at the back and commanded there. The ships were all rowed off from the land and put out to the water. Everyone steadied themselves in their seats, where they would push their way from the city. Micklegard was good to us. Now, having been recalled and come home, we go out. The Holy Land awaits. Some cheered at the prospect. Many would rather have raided elsewhere or not left the city yet. Come now, row, heave, Harold called, with some frantic energy in his voice. Those at the oars heard it as he spoke, but pulled at the oars with the pace appropriate no matter. They knew well their business. Heave, he called again, and they had to race to swing the oars back into place to push again. 5 ships launched to the bay, the 4 of Harold's longships and a 5th Byzantine ship with them. The Varangian took note of it, but many did not know its purpose. Look there, I can't help but to think that is part of the reason why we are being so swift in our exit this morning, Inga said, looking back over her shoulder. The others followed her gaze when the rhythm of the oar allowed them a moment to do so. There on the dock were a collection of men and women standing where the ships had been. They appeared to have arrived nearly 5 minutes too late to catch the ships, though their postures indicated that to have been their intent. Who do you think they are? Asked Bodil. They are dressed in finery. They could be from the court, Fitbjörn said. The court of Miklagard is coming to see us off, Niels said. That is strange indeed. Well, I hope they have a good time watching us row away. Think they want us stopped for some purpose? Asked Ragnar, a tinge of worry in his voice. Fuck 'em. If they wanted to stop us, they can come out and get us, Hafald said. Although I suppose that the chain of the horn will be the real key here. If that goes down, then we know they don't want us arrested. He shrugged, but as he said it, everyone turned to look right at the famous chain of Constantinople. Arrested for what? Asked Niels. Maybe it isn't us they want, Fitbjorn suggested. Hold, row! Harold called, and they all stopped rowing, allowing the ship to drift out a little further. They were all of them ready to pull on the left side and push on the right to turn east toward the chain. There were hundreds of other ships with brightly colored sails in the Golden Horn that morning, and they'd spend some time navigating their way through them. Turn! They on the left started to pull, while those on the right continued to push their oars in long, mighty strokes, and the whole vessel turned slowly to the east. Forward! Heave! And they pulled all together for the chain. To all their relief, the chain dropped without any hesitation, and they were able to pass over it and out into the Bosphorus. Once they were headed south, the sail was unlashed, and they were set to press for the winds. Fare thee well, Seti, Bodil said. She drew a large skin from under her seat. Here is to your health and to our voyage, she said with emphasis, and unstoppered the skin, then poured some purple wine out over the side. Skål. That wine, give me some here, Ragnar asked. She handed him the skin after taking a good drink herself. Oh, thank you. That's good stuff. Pass it to the others, Bodil invited, and they all shared in a drink together. I hope I'm not pausing. Skål, Fitbjorn said, drinking at last and letting out a deep sigh. It was a good time in the city, he said, looking back longingly. Who can say when again we'll return to the mother city and her warm embrace? Our hope it is that each of us do so and see her kindness again, Niels added. By the grace of the gods we shall, Hafald said. Though, if they were being truly generous, we'd find ourselves so great a horde that we'd go straight away to home without the need for any further death. Perhaps that will come to pass. Hey, what do you think there, Inga? Want to have a great haul with me as lord and our little ones running around? She smiled and took the wineskin again. You have to hand fast with me for that to happen. That does sound like where this is headed, though. a warm fire at the end of an adventure. We shall see. We go to the land of the Christians, Fitbjorn said. I'm sure it will have much wealth and little fight. Oh, shut your gob, Ragnar responded. Beside, there are more than just Christians in the Palestine. Most of the ruling there is Circlander. You mean it is Circland too? Asked Bodil. Aye, has been for centuries. Our god is crucified there, and theirs apparently ascended to their own heaven there. It'll be interesting to finally see the place, the holy place. I think I'll stand at the Temple Mount of Solomon, and on the hill where Christ was sacrificed. I'm sure it'll be no small thing. Always the optimist. Are you so fond of cities? How was your time in McClickard, Christian? Asked Bodil. Oh, excellent. I paid most of my earning in a great tithe to the church. The others looked at him like he were mad. You what? Asked Niels. My God mandates poverty and charity. The church feeds the poor. What does your God do? He defeats Jotun and protects Midgard, Bodil said, nearly standing. Hail, someone said from the other side of the ship, and they all laughed. You wonder who they are? Asked Bodil, looking at the Byzantine ship that was going alongside them. They are stoneworkers and craftsmen, said the man who sat in front of her. The Emperor has sent us with many laborers to restore some building in Jerusalem. Wait, we are? Asked Ragnar. We're going to rebuild something. What, a church, you think? The enthusiasm written on his face shone bright. It's some important place, I don't know, the man replied with a shrug. Michael's health is failing. I have been sent to go and restore the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in this blessed city, and you, my fighting Varangian, have luck enough to join me. They all knew the voice. They turned to behold the man. Harold Sigurdsson had walked to where they sat and stood proud, with a broad smile on his youthful face that was bearded. Michael the Fourth is a good man, a pious Christian, and he wields me like the handle with you as my blade. We are the Emperor's sword. Finally shall we see where the Christ died. The man was tall, light brown haired, and handsome. He stood an imposing figure with 1 foot up on a seat and his arms folded as he looked out to the horizon they sailed for. Soon shall I see the home of my Savior. Soon shall I stop at the hill, the Lord that protects of our mortal behavior, he who empowers my will. He spoke wistfully, with a nearly sad half smile. Was that scripture, Lord? Asked Ragnar. No, Harold said to them, but something my skald wrote out for me. Lord, asked Inga. He turned to her. Will it only be a building and pilgrimage journey? Are there more orders we have from the Emperor? The banditry on the road is a problem in the land. We shall help to clear the place of their ilk. I'm sure we shall find plunder on the road as well, but our main purpose is the pilgrimage. My Christian men will relish the chance, I'm sure, to see the place. Aye, Lord, my soul will lift at the sight of it all, Ragnar said. A fellow Christian, good man, we shall take communion in the hill. A priest will hold us a mass there. All will join in the sermon. He turned then and walked back to the front of the ship to stand at his post as commander and guide the prow on its way. They were yet weeks from the landing place and would need careful direction to achieve it safely. 2 days later, they arrived at the southern end of the Marmara, the island being only brief interests as they passed them completely in anticipation for their ultimate goal. The land beyond either side of them closed in slowly as they approached the mouth until there were only a brief window for them to pass through. The strait from the Marmara to the Aegean was known as the Dardanelles and was tricky pass to navigate. They who held the sail and the steerboard were in careful communication to make certain their ships were never set too far to one side. All 5 ships sailed down the strait in a line, with at least 2 ship lengths between each of them. The Byzantine ship of craftsmen set right in the middle, with Harold's ship at the far front, 3 ship lengths ahead. The man himself stood upon the prow, as always, looking to the coming sea. It took them a whole day to sail down the strait, Harold demanding that no one rest in their duty until they did so at the Aegean. The frenetic pace they matched the enthusiasm of all those sailing Varangian. They wanted to make for the Palestine coast as much as he. The ship sailed along Anatolia and then east along its southern shore. They spent a week on the open sea, managing to avoid a storm and keep themselves well watered and the morale high. They left the coast side and made south for open water. The way through the sea from the south of Anatolia to the shores of Palestine were always a danger, as pirates could be anywhere. But those aboard the Varangian galleys were unafraid. They, in fact, met with none, and many credited their own work for the sea's calm. When they sighted land in the middle of the sea, Harold decided that would be allowed a night's rest on the beach. They all set ashore and made a light camp, as theirs was the intention of departing first thing in the morning. Still, did they all find wood from the land and make themselves great fires for the night. Drink and food were shared, and the Varangian habit of revels and festivity emerged. It seemed inevitable. Ah, there you are, White Cloak, Olaf said, coming to join with Fitbjorn at a campfire. Olaf, Harold, yes, come and sit, Fitbjorn said. Will your friends let us join you? He and Harold sat while they nodded and said their welcomes. Olaf stroked his long yellow beard and lifted a cup of wine. So, that's what it means to live as a sailing Varangian, Harold said. Not yet, Hafald said. You haven't joined us in a raid yet. Those are what it really means. I have raided the north of Africa, the Greek Isles, Sicily, Italy. All wars for the Empire? Asked Harold. Not quite, said Niels. Mostly it's hunting down pirates. Corsairs, you may know them as? He shrugged. Well, tell me, since you are all so goodly traveled, what is this place? Olaf asked. We heard our oarsmen talking about the Copper Island. Is that its name? Nay, this is Cyprus, Ragnar said. An important stopover for Jerusalem and the sea here, being between the worlds of the Byzantine, the Egypt, and Palestine. It has often been the site for much fighting. A good place for Thor to watch the battles of men. There is much power in the ground here, Bodil said, spilling wine into the sand. What are these trees? Asked Olaf. Bodil looked at them longingly. Olive trees, she said with a smile, though I don't think the olives are in season. Or they are, and I don't know how to tell. I love olives, Harold said, excited. Think we can go and see if they are ripened? How is it that you have never seen an olive tree before? Asked Fitbjorn. Olaf and Harold shared a glance. This is the furthest ever I have come south. Olaf too. How can that be? Asked Niels, leaning back. I arrived in Miklagard with an invitation. My family and power in Normandy. He looked around. They were well enough to secure me a place in the city guard. Just like a noble guard, Hafald said, taking his arm from Inga's shoulder and leaning toward them. No fame of your own, no experience in this land. You but arrive at the city and have the most sought place made ready for you. He shook his head. Fitbjorn found himself strangely unable to tell if he was serious or making a jest. Hafald then cleared his throat, something he only did when he was drinking too much. And you are here now. Come to carve your own path through the wild and make yours a grand story, Niels offered. Olaf and Harold were staring at Hafald. Yes, that is so. Though we have fought much in our homeland before, we came ever here to Miklagard, friend. What is it with you sailing Varangian? Why have you all this fury about you? You are tempests. Harold asked. For I am Brynulf. I am Storm Hunter. The seas and the raid is where I'm most alive on Midgard. I shall pass into the hull with a smile on my face once I am slain in battle. Olaf made an expression of understanding. Heathen, he said as if realizing what was happening. You do not believe in the one true God. It reasons that you are thus. Aye, these savage folk will do with a great boon to see the holy city, Ragnar agreed. Oi, Ragnar, are you siding with these newcomers and calling me a savage for my gods? I've been calling you that the entire time I've known you, laddie. They all laughed. Even Olaf and Harold joined in. Brynulf, Olaf said. He locked eyes with him. My good Christian charity demands that I offer you a drink. Come, let us turn the other cheek and make a peace on this, can we? I think I should like to test your mettle. I think I should like to test the mettle, both of you, to see that you should be allowed to join in our battle. Inga put a hand on his shoulders. That is not needed, Fitbjorn said sternly. All here are Varangian. But they have the mettle, but have they the mettle to be sailing Varangian? What feats can you boast of in all of your time as guard? You have fought in Normandy. Against what? Frankish bandits. For their part, Olaf and Harold remained quite calm, and they heard this insult leveled at them. You wish to fight us on the beach here? Have a great measure of the worth we bring. Halfald looked confidently at them both. Olaf leaned toward him. No, he said plainly. I do not owe you any proving of my fortitude. I'll fight, Harold said. He rolled his shoulders and cracked his neck, the movement drawing attention to his wide frame and tall stature. Wait, Fitbjorn said, putting up his hand. There is no need to fight each other. You are both raiding with us on this sailing. That is no longer your say, White Bear. We now have the gods to rely on for our outcome. Halfald clenched his hands into fists and punched them against each other. Lay down, laddie. There's no reason to do as you're saying here, Ragnar said. The challenge has been made, and the challenge accepted. They have to go through with the fight now, Bodil said. Thor would never accept any less than that. If 'twould be a weakness he could not let go. And mighty Tyr above me will not have me back down from my mortal foe, who cast his own hand into the mouth of the wolf. Halfvald Brynolf said, standing. Let us have this by the beach. The lapping waves shall wash your feet as you fight, Niels suggested. Halfvald and Harold looked at each other and nodded. They strode from their fire and found a good place in the shallow water, the waves coming only at their ankles. They made a space for the fight to go on, and the men removed their tunics, throwing them to the dry sands. Both men stood now before the other, shirtless. Halfvald was a broad, brutish warrior man, a bear amongst the Varangian. His shoulders were sharp-ridged muscle, and his chest swelled wide with power. He lumbered, a hulking beast of a man, with scrawling tattoo wrapped around his body. He wore iron rings around his arms, above the bicep that flexed as he stalked around in preparation for the fight. Harold, on the other hand, had a big belly and thick arms. His chest was covered with his red beard. His shoulders were broad, and he stood just a bit taller than Halfvald. His body bore no tattoos, but he had a silver chain passing under his red beard that held a modest cross. They faced each other with their bare feet in the water, and a crowd was gathering, joining to watch the spectacle. They had agreed to a simple fist fight. Throwing was allowed, but kicking was not. It was a common set of rules for dispute fights among the army, and they were well fond of the entertainment these fights brought to them. Neither needed nor wanted anyone to set them on to the fight, and so they put their fists up to their chins and drew close to each other. Then, without a word or instruction, they both began at once, each throwing punches and catching the other's fist on their face quickly. It seemed obvious within the first few seconds what the fight would look like. Hathald was all strong punches and quick movement after. He was swift and mobile with a versatile array of attack, where Harold was all power, the meat of his arm looking to be a great defense their own. Hathald stepped in and threw a wide right punch that Harold only took on the chin and retaliated with his own. Harold shot forth an attack and struck Hathald under the eye, which seemed to have no effect, as Hathald was punching back with the same fury as before. Inga watched with her arms folded and a smirk on her face. As loath as she might have been to admit it, she absolutely loved watching this man fight. Hathald had been training in combat of all sorts since he could stand, and his greater technique was swiftly apparent. They both parted after the initial exchange and spat blood into the water. The men advanced on each other with more understanding of the fight, and the effect was amazing. Everyone watching looked on in wonderment at the great display of skill and practice they showed. Both were clearly power strikers when it came to the fight, with Hathald perhaps having just the slightest edge in experience and agility. Harold's hands moved powerfully in return, and he did manage to land hits many times, but Hathald was hitting more and staying more mobile. It seemed he was a nimble predator swarming a sturdy rock. The rock was strong, but would weaken inevitably. Finally, Hathald took a punch to the face and was heavy enough for him to stumble and splash water onto the audience. They all cheered at the moment. He backed away, shaking his head and keeping his footing, though. Come on! Harold called in a booming voice and stepped in where Hathald stepped back. He swung with his left again, then the purposeful hook he hoped would drop the man. But Hathald caught it on his right forearm and sent a vicious uppercut beneath Harold's defense and right up his chin. Harold's head excuse me. Harold's head snapped up and he wavered while going down, but he did fall to his back in the water. He lay there a moment looking around wild eyed. He breathed heavy and tried to lift himself with his hands, but he was down. They said nothing for a moment, just staring at each other with the pressure of the fight still raging in them. Slowly, Hathald let down his guard and just stood there, panting. The audience clapped and cheered Hathald's name, and he straightened up from his fighting stance. Hathald walked over to Harold and took him under the arm and then helped him to stand. They embraced and laughed after the terrible brawl, both spitting more into the water. Get this warrior a fucking drink, he said loudly. You, friend, hit like a charging ox. I am satisfied and am glad to have you fighting with us. Harold took a deep breath. You need to show me. Ugh. He groaned and held his face, spitting out blood a second after. All of that? You fight like a fucking demon storm hunter. That night, Hathald and Harold drank together. The others joined in with songs and stories, but it felt most like their night. End of that. Yeah. Never been to Cyprus. I'd really love to go, though. Up to my ankles in the water for a fight sounds like something to be a lot of fun until I really started it. Yeah, so those are the characters Olaf and Harold really joining in with the crew, and everyone making their way on to Jerusalem. This is one of the crazy stories that I read while I was doing all my research for this book. The idea that Harold Sigurdsson and a bunch of Vikings, they went to Jerusalem. That happened. This is true. Like, that's absolutely amazing to me. And I was always so flabbergasted and reading, like, how is this not a more well-known story? So here I am to everyone.